Today's story unfolds in 1978, focusing on 5 young men who were inseparable best friends residing in Yuba City, California, and became known as the Yuba Five. All these young men faced challenges related to mild intellectual disability or mental health issues, but they demonstrated a remarkable synergy in their companionship. The youngest of the group was Jack Hewitt, at 24 years old. Although he felt uncomfortable in social situations and struggled to deal with strangers, alongside his 4 best friends, he flourished, revealing himself to be incredibly funny and lively. Ted Wheeler, at 32, was the oldest of the group and took on a big brother stance towards Jack Hewitt, looking out for him in a special way. The closeness between the two was noticeable, and Ted would occasionally take over calls on behalf of Jack when he felt uncomfortable talking to a stranger. Bill Sterling, at 29, was deeply religious, dedicating much of his time to reading Christian literature in the library. Jack Madruga, at 30, was an Army veteran but was discharged after a medical assessment revealed below-average IQ. He played the role of the group's driver, being the only one with a driver's license. Jack enjoyed his role as a driver, especially because he had a special fondness for his 1969 Montego, white and turquoise, considering it his most prized possession. Last but not least, there was Gary Mathias, at 25, who assumed the unofficial role of the group's leader. Also an Army veteran, he was discharged after being diagnosed with schizophrenia. With proper treatment, he achieved stability and even a part-time job with his stepfather in a gardening business. What truly united them was their shared love for basketball. They talked about the sport, watched games, and played together. They were all enrolled in a vocational rehabilitation program that included a basketball team and were eagerly anticipating a tournament scheduled to start on February 25, 1978, where the winners would win a free trip to Los Angeles. On the night before the big tournament, on February 24th, they decided to watch their favorite team's game, UC Davis, which was playing just 80 kilometers away in Chico, California. They planned to return in time for a good night's sleep before the tournament the next day, so they boarded Madruga's Montego and headed for Chico. After the game, they made a stop at a small convenience store in town where they bought sodas, cartons of milk, and some snacks. The store owner remembered them as they arrived close to closing time, delaying his work. This was the last known sighting of the young men alive. The next morning, when they didn't return home as expected, their parents began to worry and alerted the police. Lieutenant Lance Ayres, in charge of the investigation, had a personal connection with Ted Wheeler, one of the missing young men, which further motivated him to find them. After an initial search yielded no results, Ayres decided to expand his search area. It was during this expanded search that Jack Madruga's Montego car was found, about 70 miles from Yuba City, in a remote forest, on a dirt road. The families of the young men were perplexed by the discovery of the car so far from its intended destination. There was no apparent reason for them to head to that remote area, leaving both families and investigators puzzled about what could have happened. In that isolated area of the forest, it also made no sense for the young men to abandon the vehicle. Despite being covered in snow, there were no signs that the car was stuck in the snow, and it still had approximately a quarter tank of gas, so it wouldn't have run out of fuel. Furthermore, there were no keys found in the ignition, but when the police hotwired it to start, the car ran perfectly fine, showing no mechanical issues. They simply left the car parked in the middle of nowhere and departed. Upon searching the vehicle's interior, only a few empty wrappers, cans, and boxes of snacks were found, likely consumed since they left the convenience store. All doors were closed, except for a slightly lowered window, and there were no keys in sight. During the first few days after the discovery of the car, the search yielded no signs of the young men. Unfortunately, a major snowstorm further hampered search efforts, forcing authorities to suspend it until spring when the snow began to melt. While waiting, the families of the young men offered rewards and appealed for information from anyone who might have seen anything relevant. The police received thousands of tips and unconfirmed sightings, but none led to any breakthrough in the investigation. On June 4, 1978, just over 3 months after the disappearance of the young men, some motorcyclists on a long journey through the mountains near where the car was found stumbled upon an old trailer maintained by the Forest Service, clearly not used or maintained for a long period. One of the windows was broken, which caught the attention of the motorcyclists and led them to investigate further. The abandoned trailer was a sinister discovery for them. Upon opening the door, they were hit by a terrible odor, and upon entering, they found the body of Ted Wheeler, the oldest of the Yuba Five. He was wrapped in 8 blankets, lying on a bed inside the trailer. His feet were severely frozen and gangrenous, indicating that he had been there for about 13 weeks. Ted died from starvation and exposure to the elements. The mystery deepened as investigators examined the trailer. There was a significant amount of materials for making fire, including twigs, matches, and firewood, as well as heavy clothing and ready-to-eat military food. Even a full propane tank was present, which could have been used to heat the trailer. However, there were no signs that any of these supplies had been touched. The presence of these unused supplies raised questions about why the men didn't utilize them to stay alive. Gary Mathias, one of the group members, had military experience and knowledge of survival, making it even more perplexing that they didn't take advantage of the available resources. It seemed strange that Ted didn't start a fire or use the available resources to ensure his and others' survival. A day after Ted's body was found in the trailer, investigators discovered the remains of Bill Sterling and Jack Madruga, located approximately 11 miles from where the car was found. Their bodies showed signs of hypothermia, suggesting they also died from exposure to the elements. Investigators were baffled by what happened to the Yuba Five. Despite the available resources, they seemed unable to help themselves, resulting in an inexplicable and tragic outcome. The mystery of their deaths remained unsolved, leaving their families and investigators searching for answers. 2 days after Madruga and Sterling's remains were found, Jack Hewitt's remains were also discovered 3 kilometers from the trailer where Ted Weir's body was found. Jack Hewitt also succumbed to hypothermia, leaving only Gary Mathias still missing. The only clue found by investigators was about 400 meters from the trailer, where they found a pile of blankets and a flashlight, suggesting it might have been where Gary had been at some point. However, it's unknown how long he stayed there or where he went afterward. The mystery surrounding the Yuba Five raises several unanswered questions. Why did these 5 men drive 70 miles off course on the day before an important basketball tournament they weren't willing to miss? Why did they park the car, turn it off, take the keys, and close the doors, only to walk 20 miles in the dead of night, in a snowstorm, to a remote trailer in the forest? And why, once inside the trailer, did they not use the available supplies and end up dying of starvation and exposure over 13 weeks? There are various theories about what might have happened, from the possibility of Gary Mathias being somehow responsible and still not being found, to the idea that they simply took the wrong path and got lost in that remote mountain. The mystery persists, leaving families and investigators searching for answers to this inexplicable tragedy. However, none of these theories fully explain the tragic outcome of this mystery. Authorities argue that if the Yuba Five had gotten lost, they would likely have driven in circles and not in a straight line to that remote point on the road where they abandoned the car. This behavior is inconsistent with someone who was lost. Therefore, the reason they ended up on that road and why they decided to go to the trailer remains unknown. Something happened that night that led them to make these unusual decisions, and to this day, it remains a mystery. The lack of utilization of the available supplies in the trailer is also an enigma. Something compelled them to act that way, but what exactly happened is still unknown. The case of the Yuba Five remains one of the most intriguing unsolved mysteries in history, and the truth behind their tragedy remains obscure. If you've made it this far, thank you very much, and until next time.